Welcome to the Extraordinary Yoga Teacher Summit, created by Great Energy. My name is Christopher, and I'm honored to be co-hosting the summit with Daniela Hess. The Extraordinary Yoga Teacher Summit is here to uplift and empower yoga teachers with the depth, steadiness, and skill that transform students' lives. Today's session is with our featured teacher, James Fox, whose wisdom and experience offer so much to this path. James Fox is the founder of Prison Yoga Project. He's a certified yoga instructor who, for the past 23 years, has dedicated himself to developing a trauma-adapted approach to yoga and mindfulness practices for relieving symptoms of unresolved trauma for incarcerated people. He's responsible for training and leading a team of skilled yoga teachers who have established trauma-informed yoga programs in jails and prisons throughout the US, Mexico, Europe, and Australia. A practitioner of yoga and mindfulness meditation for more than 30 years. Upon receiving his teaching credentials in 2000, James began his mission of sharing the benefits of yoga with incarcerated people. James has taught yoga classes at San Quentin Prison since 2002. He's also trained in restorative justice principles and practices and has experience facilitating courses on emotional intelligence and violence prevention with incarcerated groups. He is the author of Yoga, A Path for Healing and Recovery, and co-author of Freedom from the Inside, a women's yoga practice guide. He is also a contributor to the book Best Yoga Practices for Veterans. In addition to his work with incarcerated adults, he has experience teaching yoga and mindfulness practices for at-risk youth in juvenile detention, at a residential treatment facility for boys, and for inner-city community programs. James has served on the faculty for Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, the Yoga, Mindfulness, and Social Change program, and was an advisor to the National Institute of Health-sponsored Chicago Urban Mindfulness Program. He's been awarded the U.S. State Department grants to advise and train governmental and non-governmental personnel in Central America, involved in prisoner and ex-gang member rehabilitation programs. In 2015, he was honored by Yoga Journal magazine with the Karma Yoga Award. Welcome, James.
Thank you so much, Christopher. Nice to be with you.
James, welcome. We are here today to talk a little bit about the joys and terrors of karma yoga, about trauma-adapted yoga and embodiment practices for behavior rehabilitation. And I wonder if you could begin our conversation by sharing with us the inspiration and genesis of Prison Yoga Project.
Yeah, in my wildest dreams, I never thought that, 23, 25 years later, we'd have programs in 20 states and 12 countries. Um, well, after being dedicated to a yoga practice for many years, I felt that primarily the emotional benefits that I had experienced from yoga, that I wanted to bring something forward in that regard that I wasn't experiencing in most of the classes that I was taking. And when I decided that I wanted to become certified as a teacher, I was really clear. I wanted to bring yoga to people who weren't being exposed to yoga. And so, reflecting on that, reflecting on my own experience, and reflecting on my past of growing up inner city Chicago, experiencing what a lot of inner city youth experience, urban youth experience. Although coming from a privileged background, it didn't mean that I didn't come up against a lot of difficulties. And when I say difficulties, I think now, all these years later, I understand it as self-control, self-regulation. And how does anybody really learn self-control and self-regulation? But as a young man coming up, and if particularly if you're involved in playing sports, kind of take on this aggressive behavior, and that could be also cultural in this country. When I did my violence prevention training to be a facilitator, I learned a lot about what was called the male role belief system and how young men grow up and are influenced and guided around, well, this is how you think like a man, this is how you act like a man. So I felt that from my own experience of having been impacted by a lot of that, and from my own healing of practicing yoga, that I might have something to offer. And particularly, I started out working with young men, youth at risk. And basically, this were men 12 to 18 years old, boys 12 to 18 years old. And I started out doing that in with them in juvenile detention and in a residential treatment facility. And I was pretty much operating on instinct, on intuition, and drawing from my own past and drawing from my own healing in doing that. And discovered pretty quickly that, yes, it definitely had some value and some benefit.
Can you describe the value and benefit that you were seeing? I imagine, if not swiftly, you were having the opportunity to see the ripples of the effects of the practice, such that you would keep going.
Yeah, I think I found that, for instance, at the residential treatment facility, when I first made the presentation to the director, and she looked at me and she said, um, how long are these classes going to be? And I thought, well, gee, I haven't even thought about that. But I thought, well, since I'm going to be working with youth, 30 minutes maybe. And she started to laugh and she said, what makes you think you're going to keep their attention for a half hour? We can't keep their attention for more than 5 minutes. And what I thought to be my immediate response that I didn't say, I don't want to sit down and talk to them. I want to move with them. You guys are doing all the talking. You guys are doing all the cognitive behavioral therapy of sitting down and talking. And for anybody who has worked with youth, who's been a parent and sits down and talks to somebody 12 to 18 years old, and then, all these years later, I understand a lot more about prefrontal cortex, development and things like that. In order to really reach them, in order to have really reached me, I understood it needed to be through the body, not just through the mind. So intuitively, many, many years ago, I was understanding what trauma recovery is all about today. That if you don't involve the body, it's an incomplete job. And so, did everybody respond to it? No, of course not. But the young men who did respond to it, I could see that I was reaching them in a way that was resetting their nervous system. So, didn't just have to be medication and cognitive behavioral therapy, that this is something that they could take with them and work with it on their own.
And then the evolution from there. Sorry, I asked you a really short question while you were doing
Well, the evolution from there was I was involved at Spirit Rock Meditation Center in Northern California. And I had a friend who's a therapist that I met through there who was going into San Quentin, and he was running a group, a cognitive behavioral group. But he had been asked by the warden of San Quentin at the time to bring an innovative rehabilitation program into a specific unit at San Quentin. And so part of that rehabilitation curriculum was mind-body integration, or maybe better said, body-mind integration. And he said, I would like you to come in with me and champion that body-mind integration curriculum. And so that was in 2002. And so that's how that got started.
And okay, thank you. And so once you're in the setting, working in the prisons, can you speak to a little bit um, what challenges, what presented itself as far as such a culturally diverse population, some of the circumstances, the facts of incarceration, and the fact that there is a tremendous amount of trauma in many of the your students in the prison?
Well, there was an immediate challenge. The prison had never had a yoga program before. This unit was kind of a rough and tumble unit of 1,000 men who were housed in, well, they were called dormitories, but they looked like warehouses. And at that time, there were a lot of parole violators who went back to state prison in California. So a lot of substance abuse recovery issues. Early on, I realized that the two common denominators of anybody who's incarcerated are violence and addiction. And so anybody who brings a program into a prison, a rehabilitative program, really needs to understand there's got to be a focus on how do I address violence and addiction. That's why my book title, Yoga: A Path for Healing and Recovery. So when I first literally had to walk onto the yard to get to the classroom where I was going to teach my first class, the yard was filled with men who saw me walk in with a yoga mat under my arm and started whistling and catcalling. And, who's this guy walking in onto the yard with a yoga mat under his arm? And then meeting custody staff who at the same time were going, who are you? And what are you doing here? And you've got to be kidding me. In fact, I can quote, you're bringing yoga to these cons? So it was like, by the way, I was not escorted into the unit either. I was just walking in there on my own. So I realized, okay, I said to myself internally, you up for the challenge, James? And the answer was, yes, I am. Be careful what you ask for, right? So it started out, very few guys showed up for my first yoga class. Everything in prison spreads by word of mouth. I mean, you can present all the data, all the information, and it means nothing. What really means is if somebody has an experience from what it is that you're doing, it spreads. And typically what I found out in the very beginning was when a few guys who came to the class came back the next week, they oftentimes said, I had the best night's sleep I've had in memory after that class. And so then it begins to trickle down from best sleep to relief from chronic pain and then over time, the emotional and the psychological benefits begin to happen. So that was what encouraged me to keep going.
And before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about the cultural differences and the varying religious backgrounds of the participants and how you worked with that in this. Can you describe that a little bit about that for our listeners?
Yeah. So in a prison, I thought about this and I thought, what would be the closest comparison to something like this? And I thought probably the military, where you have such a representation of ethnicities, religious backgrounds, and so on. Maybe even more so in a prison setting because you've got a lot of immigrants who wouldn't be in the military, but you have a lot of immigrants who are in prison, and particularly in California, you've got representation of Latin Americans, Asians, Native Americans, African Americans, whites, so on and so forth. So that's the makeup of the people who come to your class. And different kinds of of religious backgrounds. I had mentioned to you that there are a fair amount of Muslims incarcerated in the United States, many who become Muslims when they are incarcerated. Um, and really understanding from the get-go, this needs to be a secular approach. Yes, we use terms like namaste because I always felt that understanding what namaste really meant was very important in terms of superseding personalities and those differences and being able to understand that within each of us there's a light that we can recognize in one another. And it's really interesting. I'll walk across the yard in San Quentin sometimes, and a guy will walk past me. I've never seen the guy before in my life, and as he walks past me, he'll say namaste. So that has trickled out into the community. Um, so that, and then there are different, there are also different parts of traditional yoga. There are different poses that you stay away from. And a lot of that is trauma informed, the trauma informed approach of yoga. Um, and you're just very careful with how you are languaging the class to kind of maintain that balance. I think that's pretty much it.
And what is some of the language that you found really was made a difference in the way yoga was shared with the students in the prison that through your lens should translate out to anyone receiving the medicine of yoga? What are some of those? What's translated that you'd say this applies everywhere?
Yeah, definitely. And well, particularly in terms of a trauma-informed approach of invitational rather than commanding language, but particularly when you're working with a group of people who are being told what to do all the time, 24/7. They're basically being commanded. And so, whatever we can do when we have the opportunity to be with them for 75 or 90 minutes to provide, number one, a safe space in an environment where safety is lacking much of the time, and whatever we can do to encourage agency. You have a choice. If you wish to do this, when it feels right to you, if it feels right to you, moving at your own pace. Perhaps you may want to find a different kind of movement as we go into this particular sequence. Whatever works for you. It's all about reconnecting with your own feelings, your own physicality, your own feelings, and finding that path rather than to do exactly what it is that I'm saying.
And I'll share a little bit about your free gift now, and then again at the end in case someone's joining later. Um, on that vein of tuning into your own instinctive and intuitive body's wisdom, um, the free gift that you have for our participants here at the summit is a Taoist inspired yoga practice. You found it to be very well received and a unique practice. So can you share a little bit about what this Taoist and yoga inspired yoga practice is and about just the body's brilliant intuitive and instinctive
Right.
wisdom?
Yeah, it's great. I love you use that term, the body's brilliance. I refer to it oftentimes as the body's own wisdom. So, one of our great teachers, one of our great mentors is Bessel van der Kolk, who has written The Body Keeps the Score. Well, the body also keeps the score in its own wisdom, right? And if you can tap back into that vein, and that's the issue that so many people in general, but particularly people who are incarcerated, have lost that connection with their bodies. They've done things where they've disconnected from their bodies in order to cause the harm that they've caused. So when we kind of drill down to why are we here? What's our mission for being in a prison? It is healing and rehabilitation. And the very first thing that we need to at least attempt is this reconnecting with a bodily sense of oneself. And again, drawing from my own experience, when I really looked at, okay, well, what were some of the fundamental things that I got from a yoga practice? And one of them was I became more sensitive to myself. I was able to, from the yoga practice, from my meditation practice, I was able to bring myself into a clear state of being sensitive to myself and understand how I harm myself. And in being able to understand how I harm myself, being able to understand how I harm others. And of course, this is an incomplete job, by the way. It's not like it's something that I'm very much aware of for myself and my own continued healing, as well as my work. And again, here's another one of those things. Later on, I understand it as a major part of restorative justice, that the key to restorative justice is addressing harm that's been caused versus meting out punishment. It's understanding the harm that's been caused. How can we repair the harm that's been caused? So it begins with how can I repair? And I found for my yoga practice, I was repairing the harm that I caused myself and that I caused other people. So the long answer to the question about the Taoist practice, I had studied done some studying of primarily Tai Chi, some Qigong, and in my sharing the yoga practice with the men at San Quentin and encouraging them follow what it is that your body would like to do, I found myself at different times like, well, my body, I may want to go into Warrior Two, but I may want to express this differently. And so then I started moving into different kinds of movements that was incorporating Tai Chi and Qigong type movements. And then I was able to introduce Taoism, and I was also able to introduce martial arts comes from Taoism, go into the whole theory of meridians and so on and so forth. And the men were intrigued by it all. And so I carried it forward and found that universally the response has been very positive.
Beautiful. Thank you. James, we have the title of this conversation as The Joy and Terror of Karma Yoga. I love the title. Let's talk a little bit about the joys and terrors of Karma Yoga, big picture. And for the yoga teachers and the yoga students that are here listening right now, what message, what transmission, what blessing is there for those that they feel the potency of the path of Karma Yoga deep in their heart?
I moved to California in the 70s because I got recruited into the wine business. And I ended up being a marketing director for one of the major wine companies in the country. And I did that for, gosh, almost 20 years. The last couple of years I was in the wine business, I had a voice inside of me that was saying, when are you going to align your work with your heart? And I was fortunate, to have grown up and been influenced by the importance of kindness and the importance of being of service, actually. And so as this voice continued to grow inside of me, I realized I've got to make a change. I've got to make a change. I need to, number one, I need to get out of this business because it was no longer healthy for me to be in the business, number one. Number two, I needed to follow my heart's calling, which was how can I be of service? I had no idea what that was going to look like. But that became my regular prayer. How can I be of service? How can I be of service? And so it presented itself this way. And it's like, you put a prayer out to the world and you say, how can I do this? And you get the answer, oh, no, not that, not that. Yes, that. And yeah, there was no great, there was, there was no great immediate feedback from working with 12 to 18-year-old young men. I'll tell you that in the beginning. But in being able to pretty quickly feel the shift from working in a business environment where you were working toward a financial goal, whether you're marketing wine or you're marketing internet equipment or whatever the case might be, the long-term goal is, well, this is a money-making proposition versus this is this is a human kindness proposition. And to be number one, to be able to express that and feel what it feels like to express that. Number two, to have it received and to experience its reception. There's in from my experience, nothing has touched that in terms of personal fulfillment. And I also saw it as kind of a maturation of my yoga practice, that a lot of my yoga practice for a long period of time was what I was getting out of it and the benefits that I was receiving. And then when I reached this point where I said, I want to be able to now go out and teach people who haven't been exposed to yoga before and give back from the benefits that I experienced from yoga. So that felt like a natural progression of my own yoga evolution. Um, and then on top of that, which I think is also really important, it certainly doesn't make me a special person. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm following my own path. I'm following my own dharma, right? And it doesn't make me a special person. It I'm being true to myself. And so now the if there are any pitfalls of the pitfalls could be that you get egotistically involved in, oh, well, I'm doing all this great work. I've impacted so many people, and that makes me really a special person. Um, and then the other would be, I'm putting out all this effort, and people are like, well, who cares? I'm putting out this effort to be of service, and it's not being received. So the other part of karma yoga is that I'm doing this without expectations of an outcome. I'm doing it because I'm aligned with doing it, and it's not because I'm expecting some kind of outcome. I'm expecting some kind of a benefit from what it is that I'm doing. If it happens, beautiful.
What would you say to someone that hears those first nudges, the first commands of their dharma, and maybe you enter into internal negotiations or you say, absolutely not. Like, I don't want to, no, I don't want to be that person. What would you suggest? How would you suggest they work with that or simply stay with that such that life can meet them as it is meant to meet them?
Right. Well, I think it takes courage. I think it takes um I think it takes a willingness number one to know well, you're going to be met with challenges. I mean, it's not like the doors are going to be open right away and you've got this feeling and you want to follow the feeling. You're going to be challenged, but at the same time, can you use can you use the silence and the insight of your practice to continue to guide you? That space, and this is an assumption that I'm making, okay? But that space that every dedicated yogi gets to, in that everything disappears except for that union with the deepest part of ourselves. And I think that's what continues to pull us along. And to stay with that and to allow that to inform you and to trust that that's going to inform you, that you can't go wrong if you stay with that. That's my only attempt at answering your question.
Thank you. That was really beautiful and very actionable. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, James, it has been a pleasure to be with you today. Friends that are here with us right now, please make sure you click below to receive the beautiful gift from James, the Taoist inspired yoga practice. It's a unique practice, and we know you're going to love it. So please, if you're like, wow, I wonder what Taoist yoga feels like, please make sure you pick up this beautiful gift from James. And James, in closing, if you were to imagine that, let's say the millions of yoga teachers that are on planet Earth right now could hear your parting words and message, we welcome that in conclusion.
Mm. I think we've got this incredibly ancient practice that we can lean on to guide us through these very challenging times that we're faced with. Um, and I would say that never minimize the whatever simple karmic gift you can offer, whether the gift you offer as a parent, whether it's the gift you offer as a teacher, whether it's the gift you offer as a coworker, that this is all about living our yogic life, right? I mean, it's one thing we're on the mat and we're practicing, but why do we do that? We do that so that we can take it out into the world and incorporate it into our lives. And I really encourage people to use their practice in that way.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
James. It was an honor to meet you and to speak with you today. And thank you so much for your contribution to this extraordinary yoga teacher summit. We really
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much for the opportunity to be with you.
thank you so much. We'll see you at the next talk, friends.
Okay.